Just minutes ago, information leaked from inside the production of Ghost Adventures confirms that a crew member was hospitalized following a terrifying incident that occurred during an uncut lockdown, footage the network has refused to air. According to early reports, the event forced Zach Bagans to halt filming, shut down the location, and remove multiple staff from the scene. What happened inside that building was not a typical EMF spike or disembodied voice. Crew describe it as the most direct physical event ever caught off camera. Subscribe now, because what unfolded in that dark hallway has left even longtime investigators shaken. The investigation was never meant to take place inside the east wing of the abandoned facility. Even in the planning stages, producers flagged that section of the building as structurally unsafe, and local historians warned that the wing's reputation for violent encounters was far more severe than anything previously documented by Ghost Adventures. Staff who scouted the location in daylight reported an oppressive silence inside the corridor, a stagnant stillness that felt unnatural even for a dead building. But when Zach Bagans reviewed the preliminary walkthrough footage, he insisted the team conduct a full lockdown there without cutting, without leaving, and without external crew interference. What he didn't know was that the decision would set the stage for one of the most dangerous nights in the show's history. According to town records, the East Wing had once served as an isolation ward where patients were kept without visitors, windows, or sunlight. Former employees admitted that staff refused to work alone in the wing after sunset, and multiple reports described a presence that followed people out into the main hallway. One former nurse said she quit her job after hearing footsteps behind her during rounds, only to turn and find the hallway empty every single time. Decades later, when urban explorers entered the same corridor, several claimed to hear low breathing in their ear before sprinting out in panic. Locals insisted the wing wasn't haunted, it was predatory. When the Ghost Adventures crew arrived, the building reacted instantly. Their equipment carts rolled on their own despite the floor being level. Battery drains hit before the team even crossed the threshold. The digital thermometer dropped 10 degrees the moment the East Wing door opened, and a deep, metallic hum vibrated through the walls as if something inside recognized they had returned. Aaron Goodwin reported nausea immediately. Jay felt a sudden pressure behind his eyes. Even Zach, who rarely comments on pre-lockdown sensations, stated plainly, "I don't like the energy in this hall. It feels aware." Still, the plan proceeded. Cameras were mounted, audio recorders tested, emergency lights were shut off. This would be the last time the crew stood in that hallway with the comfort of preparation. Because once the lockdown began, the building made it clear they were not alone. The moment the lights were killed and the doors sealed, the energy inside the East Wing shifted from uneasy to suffocating. Full lockdown procedures meant no stepping outside, no resetting equipment, and no stopping the cameras. It also meant the crew had only their handhelds, body-mounted audio, and the ambient darkness surrounding them. Almost instantly, the familiar static of baseline EMF began to spike, not in short bursts, but in a rising, steady climb that suggested a continuous electrical presence drifting just above human height. Zach whispered that he felt something pacing behind us, though no footsteps were caught on audio. It wasn't until later that they realized the audio recorder had been recording, but not playing back anything from the hallway at all. As the team advanced deeper into the wing, the first wave of physical symptoms struck. The camera operator at the rear reported dizziness and sudden temperature drops at his back, as if something cold were inches away from touching him. Aaron's left arm went numb for several seconds. Jay described the sensation of static crawling up his spine, like fingers moving deliberately. Normally, these early sensations would be shrugged off as atmospheric pressure or adrenaline, but this time they came with an unnerving detail. Each time a crew member reported discomfort, the EMF meter aligned with their exact physical location, as if the energy field were choosing who to approach next. Around the 7-minute mark, the building's acoustics began behaving unpredictably. The hallway swallowed their voices, absorbing sound into a thick, muffled distortion. When Zach called out for a sign, the words didn't echo. They simply vanished into the dark. The team's wireless microphones started glitching, introducing strange harmonic tones underneath normal speech. Reviewers later noted these tones matched the frequency of breathing, long, slow inhalations that didn't belong to anyone in the room. Then came the first major equipment failure. The main camera's infrared mode flickered violently between visible and thermal, cycling through modes on its own. Aaron swore something brushed past his jacket, and he spun around with his light, revealing nothing but the peeling paint on the walls. At the same moment, Jay captured a brief thermal signature on his handheld unit, a human-shaped mass that appeared for less than half a second before disappearing entirely. When framed slowed, the figure seemed to be bending toward the injured camera operator. Zach's tone shifted immediately. He no longer spoke like an investigator searching for proof. He spoke like someone who understood the environment had turned hostile. "Stay together. Don't break formation," he ordered, his voice tight, controlled, and unsettlingly calm. The team tightened into a formation rarely used, except in situations involving known aggressive entities. But they couldn't have predicted what the building had planned next, because just moments later, they would enter the narrow hallway that had already driven multiple visitors out in fear. And this time, one of their own wouldn't leave on their feet. The deeper they moved into the East Wing, the more the atmosphere thickened, as if the building itself was narrowing around them. The hallway ahead was infamous among former staff, a long, windowless stretch known for producing violent outbursts in patients and panic attacks in anyone who entered alone. Even Zach, who had researched the location extensively, admitted that the wing's central corridor carried a history darker than the rest of the building combined. But none of them expected the environment to shift so abruptly the moment their boots crossed its threshold. The temperature dropped nearly 15 degrees in under 3 seconds, triggering simultaneous alarms on multiple handheld sensors. Aaron gasped, clutching his chest, saying he felt like someone was standing directly behind him, leaning in. The camera operator, who would later collapse, reported hearing a single whispered word, something he couldn't understand, but described as uncomfortably close to my ear. Audio recorders captured nothing but a faint tonal distortion at the exact timestamp, a warping sound that grew louder each time the clip was replayed. The entire hallway seemed to absorb their lights. Even with high-output IR on, visibility collapsed by half. Shadows stretched unnaturally long along the wall, bending at angles inconsistent with any known light behavior. Jay aimed his thermal camera ahead, and for a split second, a cold mass appeared halfway down the corridor, motionless, humanoid in silhouette. By the time he blinked, it was gone. When he rewound the footage, the clip refused to play. The timestamp froze, the data corrupted for that single second. Then came the first major interference event. Every wireless mic cut simultaneously, producing a loud pop through the headsets, followed by a shrill, low-frequency hum. The hum vibrated through their ribs, tightening their breathing. Zach called out, but his voice did not transmit. Instead, the system recorded his words only as static, except for one anomaly. Just beneath the static, a second voice appeared, lower, almost growling, mirroring the cadence of his speech with a half-second delay. The pressure in the hallway intensified. The air felt denser, heavier, as if something unseen filled the space around them. The crew described the moment as a shift from presence to pursuit. The EMF meter in Aaron's hand shot from baseline 0.1 to a sustained 8.7, a reading typically associated with direct proximity to an entity displaying intentional movement. The camera operator began breathing harder, stating he felt compression around his head, like invisible hands pushing inward. Then the final warning sign hit. A sudden metallic slam echoed from the far end of the corridor. Not a door, not debris, something forceful, deliberate. The sound was so loud that it shook dust from the ceiling. Zach immediately raised his flashlight, scanning the length of the hall, but nothing moved. There was no wind, no structural shift, nothing that should have caused it. And yet, every member of the crew felt the same thing. Whatever made that noise wasn't trying to hide anymore. It was coming toward them. Seconds later, a crew member would collapse, and the lockdown would turn into an emergency. What happened next unfolded so quickly and so violently that no camera caught the full event. The crew had just begun repositioning themselves after the metallic slam when every piece of equipment in the hallway surged at once. IR lights dimmed to black. Wireless audio cut. The handheld EMF meters froze mid-reading. For nearly 2 full seconds, the entire lockdown went silent, as if the building had swallowed all sound. When the feeds returned, the chaos had already begun. A sharp, guttural impact came from behind the camera operator. the same one who had reported ear pressure minutes earlier. Jay's thermal cam jolted toward the noise, capturing only a distorted blur rushing across the frame, a ripple of cold so intense it blew out the color scale. A split second later, the operator screamed, his voice cracking into pure panic before cutting off abruptly. His camera hit the ground, spinning wildly as the hallway erupted into confusion. Zach shouted for emergency lights, but they flickered uselessly, illuminating only fragments of movement. Aaron yelled that something had rushed straight through the crew member, not into him, through him. When the lights finally stabilized, the operator was on the ground, flat on his back, limbs rigid, eyes open but unfocused. His breath was shallow, and a low wheeze escaped from his throat, as if his lungs were fighting invisible weight. The most unsettling detail was the temperature around his body. A handheld thermometer placed near his chest read 39 degrees Fahrenheit, a near impossible drop for a human body in such a short span of time. Every attempt to lift him caused new equipment malfunctions, radios cutting out, cameras glitching, and battery packs draining instantly. What little audio survived the moment captured one chilling sound just before the collapse. A whisper layered beneath the static, repeating a single phrase: "Stay." It was the last thing recorded before the lockdown was officially broken. The moment the lockdown broke, the crew dragged the fallen camera operator into the nearest lit room, but the symptoms they observed made no medical sense. His breathing was shallow and irregular, almost as if he were inhaling against resistance. His skin was ice cold to the touch, not just chilled by the environment, but cold in a way that suggested his body temperature had dropped internally. When Aaron removed his glove to check for a pulse, he recoiled instantly, saying the operator's chest felt like a freezer door. Paramedics were called to the scene, but while they rushed to prepare transport, the building itself reacted again. The EMF spikes began pulsing in rhythmic waves, rising each time the medic touched the victim. Portable monitors malfunctioned the moment they approached him. One medic's radio died the instant it made contact with the stretcher. Another reported a crushing pressure in her ears, forcing her to step outside. None of them could explain why his fingertips were turning gray, or why his breath created visible condensation in a hallway that had returned to normal temperature. When the operator finally regained partial consciousness, he wasn't able to speak. His mouth moved, but no sound came out, only a harsh, airless rasp. His eyes darted toward the dark hallway, wide with panic, as though something still stood just beyond the threshold. Then, in a moment that startled even Zach, the EMF meter lying next to him lit up on its own, jumping to a sustained 9.3 before dropping back to 0 as he squeezed his eyes shut. Every attempt to move him closer to the corridor resulted in new equipment failures. Paramedics refused to re-enter that section of the building. The stretcher was rerouted out a different door entirely, but the most disturbing moment came in the ambulance. According to the medic's confidential note, he flinched violently each time we drove past a shadow, as if something was following us. Whatever happened in that hallway wasn't finished with him yet. Back at the command station, producers immediately pulled the raw feeds from every camera in the East Wing, desperate to understand what had taken the operator down. But as they scrubbed through the recordings, they discovered something far more troubling than a simple equipment failure. The footage surrounding the incident behaved like it had been tampered with from the inside. Files that should have run continuously were punctured by stretches of corrupted data, black frames, and visual tearing that didn't match any known hardware malfunction. One camera, positioned at the far end of the hallway, caught the clearest fragment. For less than half a second, a figure appeared behind the injured operator, not solid, not fully human, but a distorted mass bending unnaturally forward as if leaning into him. Its outline bulged and contracted like heat mirage, yet the thermal signature registered as colder than the surrounding air by nearly 30 degrees. Analysts later confirmed the figure's distortion matched the same temperature drop recorded on the operator's chest. Even more disturbing was the audio beneath the visual corruption. When isolated and enhanced, a layered frequency emerged, a growl-like vibration that shifted into something faintly resembling a voice, raspy, slow, deliberate. The spectral analysis showed the sound hitting frequencies outside normal human capability. 3 words were detected, though only one was unmatched unmistakably clear, "I'm here." The network's legal team immediately intervened. They flagged the audio as psychologically destabilizing and recommended it never be aired, not even in a censored form. The clip was moved to a restricted server accessible only to senior producers and Zach himself. Zach's reaction was uncharacteristically subdued. After reviewing the footage alone, he reportedly stepped out of the room and said only, "That thing wasn't showing itself to the camera, it was showing itself to him." From that moment forward, the episode was frozen. No more previews, no promotional cuts, no release date. Because what they captured in that hallway didn't just injure a crew member, it proved that something inside the building was aware of them and responding. Once the severity of the incident became undeniable, Zach made a decision he has made only a handful of times in the history of Ghost Adventure. He ordered a full, immediate shutdown of the lockdown. No more filming, no more EVP sessions, no more thermal sweeps or spirit box attempts. The East Wing was declared off-limits. Even veteran crew members, many with years of exposure to violent hauntings, described the shift in Zach's tone as unlike anything they'd heard before. He wasn't angry, he wasn't shaken, he was worried. Behind the scenes, the remaining crew were ushered into a holding room while paramedics transported the injured operator. Zach arrived moments later, his face pale, visibly tense. According to multiple crew reports, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His silence alone communicated the gravity of what they had just encountered. When he finally spoke, his words were simple but chilling. "We almost lost someone tonight. That's not happening again." Producers attempted to continue the investigation in a limited capacity, but Zach refused. He insisted the anomaly inside the East Wing was not a typical residual haunting. He stated that the entity's behavior showed signs of premeditation, targeting, and follow-through, a combination that even seasoned investigators consider exceptionally rare and extremely dangerous. Attempts to retrieve equipment left inside the hallway resulted in new malfunctions. A lighting rig powered off without warning the moment a tech approached the threshold. Another camera drained its battery from 80% to 0% in under 10 seconds. Zach stopped the retrieval altogether, leaving thousands of dollars of gear behind. When the building's owner saw a still frame from the corrupted footage, just a blurred silhouette rising behind the operator, she refused to allow the team back into that wing or to continue any overnight activities on the property. Before exiting the location for the final time, Zach made a statement to the internal crew log. "This place isn't haunted by something trapped. It's haunted by something that chooses when to act." The investigation was officially over, but the consequences of that night were far from finished. Back at headquarters, the atmosphere was unlike anything the Ghost Adventures team had experienced. Instead of the usual energetic debrief, senior staff gathered in a closed-door emergency meeting. Phones were left outside. Footage was locked behind encrypted access. This was not about editing an episode. This was about containing an incident. Medical consultants, producers, and technical engineers sat around the table while a still frame from the corrupted hallway footage flickered on the monitor. A blurred, distorted figure bending toward the fallen operator. Zach entered quietly, noticeably shaken. When asked if the episode should move forward, he didn't hesitate. "We're not airing a lockdown that nearly killed someone." His voice wasn't dramatic. It was firm, decisive. But underneath it, everyone sensed the deeper truth. Airing that clip risked provoking something beyond their control. Medical staff reported the operator's condition as stable but abnormal. He complained of intense cold that wasn't reflected in hospital readings and flinched whenever shadows passed near the bed. When asked if he remembered the moment he collapsed, he simply muttered, "It got inside the room before it got to me." Doctors had no explanation for his symptoms. Then came the technical review. Engineers revealed that several parts of the footage weren't corrupted by equipment failure. They appeared rearranged, overwritten, reshaped by something interacting with the file itself. One technician described it as distortion with intention, a phrase that left the room silent. If the entity was influencing digital systems, airing the footage could expose audiences to the same destabilizing frequencies recorded in the hallway. Legal advisors stepped in next. They warned that broadcasting the audio especially the whispered phrase captured moments before the collapse, could open the network to liability for psychological harm. They recommended complete suppression of all uncut footage. Finally, Zach spoke again. This wasn't just an attack, it was deliberate. We pushed too far. His expression made it clear. What happened wasn't paranormal entertainment. It was a breach. The consensus was unanimous. The episode would be shelved indefinitely. The uncut footage would remain locked. The building owner later banned all future investigations on the property, citing entity volatility. As of now, the hospitalized crew member continues to recover, but refuses to return to filming. And insiders believe this lockdown marked a turning point for the entire series, because this time, the entity didn't just make itself known, it fought back.